Guy Mesger, Jerry Bolander, the whole Vernon White, the whole Lions Den. Back in the day, I remember the legendary tryouts. If you think you're going to make it on the Lions Den team, well, you got to go through this first. Looking back at those tryouts, and if you want to explain them, please go ahead, to what you would recommend now for mixed martial arts or someone that says, you know what, I want to get into MMA. Is it still the same?
No, it's different. It's tough too, because it's like talking about football, or even baseball or basketball, and you try to compare the old great players with the great players today. Different time, different era, different training methods. The old guys wouldn't even compete, but if you put these guys that were doing what they are today back in that situation, could they compete with the old guys without the way these training methods are today and the things that they have to at their disposal today? Could they do that? Take them old guys and put them in the new era. Could they? With all the things at their disposal. So it's like apples and oranges talking about what they've done in their time. They were great. And that's the kind of thing that I look at, apples and oranges. It's hard to compare that.
So if I was to throw out something like, if you could pit any fighter from any generation versus any fighter from any generation, is there anything that would come to mind? Like a dream fight? Like a GSP versus Hoyce, or a Shamrock versus Johnny Bones Jones?
How about Shamrock versus Tito Ortiz?
Well, so my next question.
Get out of town. I crush him.
Talk about that whole Tito Ortiz chapter from when it all started, because it started with, I don't know if it was the Bolander fight or the Mesger fight.
Mesger.
The Mesger fight. And then the whole, where it ended.
Yeah, it was kind of weird too, because really I saw him and he was part of Tank's crew, and I was really impressed with his ground technique, with being in the guard, being able to control the guard, being able to ground and pound. And even at a young age, he looked like he had something. And I was looking at that, and I was like, it had nothing to do with Tank, the way Tank fought. I was like, how in the world is he in that camp? And so I remember watching that, and I liked his style. I liked what he was doing. I liked his intensity. I liked his preparation for the fights. I liked the trash talk. I liked that stuff that he had. And then that fight with Mesger, where I thought Mesger got robbed, because they were both exhausted. Neither one of them could really hold their arms up. And I remember John stopped the fight. And I was like, I remember coming over the fence going, what are you doing? It's like he had no power on them punches. It's like he's not hurting anybody. They're both exhausted. What are you stopping the fight for? I remember a guy looking up going, I didn't tap, right? And John goes, well, you're not doing anything. He's not hitting me, right? And so I remember coming over there, and then I remember Tito got up and he flipped. People are off, and he put this shirt on, Gay Mesger's my yacht. And I remember looking at that, and I'm like, you didn't win, and I was so friggin' angry. And I'm coming over there, and then Tito kind of walks up, and he goes right like this in my face. And I started to come over. My team grabbed me, his team grabbed him, pulled him away. And that's how really it all started, was that disrespect. Especially in a fight like that, where deep down in your heart, for a fact you got your butt pulled out of a bad situation. Even though they were both tired, neither one of them was in danger. But you did get handed a shot there, a win there, in which you were gassing out, and it could have turned on a dime at any time, especially if the guy would have got back to his feet, because he was a great striker. And Tito would have had to use more energy to try to take him down again. And in MMA, that's a lot of energy to try and shoot when you're tired and the guy's on his feet. So it was one of those things. And even if it had gotten over, right, and there was none of that flipping off or anything like that, I'd have gotten over it. It's just trying to protect your fighter, trying to stand up for him. And then after, a couple days later, you're over it. But when they do something like that, it's like, are you serious, man? I'm not in the ring. But I'm about to be.
The rivalry could go down as the greatest ever.
Unfortunately,
yeah. Well, it made for great stuff for the shows. It's such I think it's a wonderful chapter in history of MMA, because it just showed two different guys, two different upbringings, well, sort of the same, but sort of different, and fearless.
I think it shows two guys coming from the same kind of background, just different times. Different eras. I came from the beginning where it was hardcore, hard-nosed, develop your own training methods, to training methods that were in place, and different style of fighting, old school against the new school, and you don't get to see that too much in sports. Unfortunately for myself, it was a little bit disappointing because, in your mind you just wish you could push it back 10 years, but it was what it was. And I really enjoyed that time. I wish that in some circumstances that I could have been a little bit more, But unfortunately, where I was at during those times, it was what it was. But we took Tito Ortiz and myself took MMA and put it on our backs, and we pushed it up to where it's at today. So there's no one that can deny that.
Well, you're fighting in a couple months.
Yes.
Well, more than a couple months, actually. July, I think it is?
July 27th.
July 27th.
Yeah.
Ian Freeman.
Yes.
So when I first heard the news, I was like, Ken's getting back in the cage. The first thing I said was, why? Is it competitive juices?
Trust me, you ain't the first one to say that.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering, because is it monetary? Is it just I want to fight? Is it just something about it that you want to do it?
I think it's all of that. I mean, it's funny because first thing when someone says was, "Oh, he must be broke again," it's like, yeah, of course I need the money. I mean, God, I have another 40 or 50 years to live. I mean, hey, I built a life for myself, and I have to be able to afford that life. And so therefore, I have to keep working. I'm not broke, but man, if I sit on my ass, I will be. And it's not fun not doing anything. So when people say that, it's like, yeah, I do need money. I mean, maybe not now, but 20 years I might. So, I mean, it's just looking ahead, trying to make sure that you pad yourself, making sure you're not sitting at 60 or 70 years old, God give you that many years to live, that you're not trying to go on unemployment, trying to find out where you can make money, because you can't go back and change anything. And that's why I'm talking about with these fighters that are fighting. You don't realize how many years you have to live. And that when you're done with this, what do you have to fall back on?
It's funny you mention that, because I have conversations with a lot of the young guys, and some of them are current UFC champions. And I've always told them, and I'm sure you've told your guys this, you're born here, you die here. Your career is this big. You need to maximize the revenue from your brand in there so that the rest of your life you can live off.
It doesn't work like that. There's no way you can make enough money in that small amount of time to live the rest of your life.
So how do you do it,
have to maximize, which the UFC does not allow them to do, be able to maximize the name you build in the UFC to build another something that would break off of what you've done in your fighting. When UFC doesn't allow them to market themselves, they won't allow them to brand themselves. It has to be UFC branded with their name. And that's something that I did. I branded myself, and they didn't like that. They wanted me not to be out coaching for other organizations and not to go out and do other things unless they gave me permission. And I said, hey, I did this way before you got here. I helped build the UFC. My name is part of the UFC, and you're going to tell me I can't use it? That's where I made my stand.
That was in the IFL days.
Yes.
Yeah. Ken Shamrock right now is 21 years old. He's going to start MMA right now. What advice would you give to yourself?
Get an education.
No
Get
fighting?
something to fall back on.
Okay.
Get something to fall back on. Because the way that MMA is today, the best fighters are not getting the shot. It's whoever wants to roll with the punches and go with the flow. Those are the ones that are going to get the break. Not the guys that have their own mind and they're strong-minded and strong-willed. Those aren't the guys that are going to get the shot. It's not going to happen.
Are you saying, is it more of you've got to be, we'll call it a company man, or you got to be a Chael Sonnen where you got to sell?
Well, even Chael Sonnen, I mean, I don't think he even realizes it, but I mean, the minute that his market goes away, he's done. I mean, nobody respects him. I mean, fans like him, don't get me wrong. He's on top right now, even though he hasn't won a title yet, and he's out mouthing off and doing all the things that he does. He even calls me out, and I wasn't even in the game then. I'm like, really? I said, what are you getting out of that? So it's like he just mouths off and things that don't matter. It's like, if you're going to brand something and you're going to try and build something, you want to make money on something, then mouth on to something that's going to make you money, not something that's not going to make you money. And so he kind of flails all over the place, but right now it's working for him. But when it's over, and he needs to understand this, it's like a Mike Tyson syndrome. When it's over, they're going to step on your head. The same people you're talking trash about are the same ones you're going to meet on the way down. And they're going to help you down faster. So, I mean, if you want to start out like that and you want to be that way, I would stick to, confining it to maybe your opponent, maybe his camp, whatever the thing is at the time. But to just blow off and try and piss everybody off, man, at the end of that, you're gonna wish you didn't.
Looking back at some of the guys many of us thought you should have faced, I know you're fighting Ian Freeman. He was around way back when too, but guys like Tank Abbott, Marco Huas to me would have been just crazy. But you look back.
That would have been disappointing for you guys. I'd have taken him down and submitted him. He didn't have very good defense through the submissions.
Were there any guys back in the day? Were there any guys back in the day where you're like, I wish that fight took place? One guy, two guys, three guys, anyone in general?
No, because I mean, I really didn't. Like I said, I was pretty focused on what I was doing. I saw a lot of great fights, but I wish I would have gotten a shot with Mark Coleman. I would have liked to seen that happen because I was pretty strong. I was pretty strong guy. And I trained with Mark Coleman, and it would have been a good fight. That would have been one that would have been really a good fight. Two guys in great shape.
Pre-Hammer House, or during the
it
Hammer
was
House
actually
days?
when he first came in. He was shredded.
Yeah.
If we could have fought then, I thought that would have been awesome.
Who is the greatest mixed martial artist of all time?
Me.
Why?
I just think that, when you look at the things that I've accomplished, I started a lot of stuff. I first came in, I started the striking and the ground thing. I was the first one to come in with well-rounded. First champion. Well, of course, people would argue that Mark Coleman was the first one, but when I talk about super fight belt, right, that means I fought every weight class, heavyweight, middleweight, lightweight, whatever it was. I fought it and I won it. So every belt goes through there. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm the first heavyweight champion, period. Over in Japan, first foreign champion, first pancreas champion. Pancreas has delivered more champions in more organizations than any other organization that had fighters in it. Yeah, you had, 10 guys come out of there? Frank?
Yeah.
Boss. There's just so many guys that come out of there that had actually crowned champions in the UFC. And I was a champion in that. I beat all those guys. I trained most of those guys. So, I don't know. I just think that, as far as you look at the credentials, there wasn't anything I ever accomplished, whether it was in wrestling or whether it was in MMA. I always rose to the top and I always won the belt, period. And in any organization that I was in.
Any regrets looking back?
Yeah, a lot of them. It's the same
But they
thing.
make you who you are, though.
Yeah, they do. Well, it's education to, develop you when you get into your 40s and your 50s to become a man, to be responsible and turn around and do things for other people. It helps you help other people with what you go through younger in life, which I think is a responsibility to every human being on this earth, is to turn around and help somebody else that may be going through the same situations that you're going through the same business or professional, whatever you chose to be into, that you can help other people get through some rough spots because you've been there. And so I think it's something that it's a responsibility to every human being that is 40, 50 years old that has an opportunity, reach out and help somebody else behind them.
Now, I say this out of respect because, like I said, you, Hoist, and Frank were the reasons why I would keep going to the gym. And to this day, it's just like, I still look back at how you guys, when Frank pulled off the, 37-second armbar, I don't remember the time, against Kevin. It's just crazy stuff, explosive. What's your relationship like with Frank right now? Is it still null and void sort of thing? Or is it high-bye?
Our relationship's a little bit different. There's a lot of people like Frank, it is what it is. It's personal, it's family. It doesn't, I don't know. I just, on that one there, I don't want to get into it because I think it would really hurt him. He knows what he did. He knows it was wrong. He has to live with it, period.
Tito Ortiz, what's our relationship like?
I haven't really thought much about it, when I prepare for a fight, I prepare. And I look at guys and I find things that I don't like about them. And I pick at it because I have to get that anger. That's just me. Every fight I've done that. Thank goodness it plays well, but it's not done on purpose. It's just how I prepare. Tito Ortiz was just another guy that I prepared for in a fight, and I found things about him that I didn't like. Fortunately for me, I could find a lot of things, but I don't, as a person, I don't even know him. You know, I really don't even know the guy.
At all?
No, I don't know him as a person outside of fighting. I don't know him. But as a fighter, I know him from what I picked on. That's it. And people go, was it real? Hell yeah, it was real. I made it real because that's how I prepare. But as Tito, as a person, I don't know him. I heard things, but I don't believe anything I hear and half of what I see.
So if you saw Tito or Frank or guys that the media thinks are enemies, if you saw them walking in the room right now, would you say hi or just be like, you know, I'm not dealing with this right now?
I would probably say hi to Tito. Yeah.
No Frank, no Dana, no Lorenzo.
No, Dana I would.
Yeah.
Like I said, life's too short.
Yeah.
Now with Frank, that's a whole different thing. That's family. It's something he did that can never be changed, and he can never change that. And so it would be difficult for me because of the connections and the things that we've done, the sacrifices that were made. It would be difficult for me with the choice that he made. It would be very difficult.
How do you want to be remembered in mixed martial arts 20 years from now?
I'm not sure. I hope that, you know, myself, I cared about what the fans thought. I always have, maybe too much. But it just, I don't know, for some reason, it was always important for me, for people to understand that I worked hard and that I want to make people enjoy what I do. And I want to be the best, and I want people to think that I'm the best. And so therefore, I push to do that. And I've always been real close with my fans. Always tried to include them with what I was doing, and even with my anger and different things like that. And even if they didn't agree with me, you know, but they were still there, and they didn't have to. I never forced anybody to, and they could have their own opinions. But I just don't want to be a puppet for anybody. I just, if anybody was going to ever remember me for anything, and I wouldn't even necessarily want them to even remember me by being the best, even though that's what I wanted to achieve. And have that legacy. I never want to do anything halfway. I always want to be best whatever I do. But I think anything that would come out of somebody's mouth, if they were going to remember me, was that I was not a guy that would just roll with the punches, and that I stood up for what was right, period.
From the world's most dangerous man, are you now the world's most dangerous granddad?
I'm the world's most dangerous granddad fighter. I'm going to be the grandpa still fighting. You know, it brings me to an actual situation where I get people all the time, and even yourself have thought that, where when someone looks at me and they go, man, he's 49 years old, why is he still fighting? And yet I keep myself in shape like a young fighter, probably better than these guys do in the off season, probably better than they do. I keep myself that way because I enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I want to keep doing it as long as I possibly can. I'm not doing it for anything other than myself and the fans that want to follow me. I'm not forcing anybody. I'm not trying to gain anybody else. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. I love the competition. And as long as I'm healthy and that I'm capable of doing it and doing the training, why shouldn't I be able to do what I enjoy? Most people retire from lawyer or whatever it is, and they go out there and they start buying cars. They fix them up and they take them to car shows. Some people do other things, I don't know, fishing, hunting. Why can't I do what I do that makes me happy in my later years? Why can't I do what makes me happy? Because I might get hurt? Come on. That's, I mean, if I'm going to get hurt, I might as well get hurt something I love doing, not something I don't love doing.
What do you do for training? Same old, same old? What are you doing for training now? Same old, MMA, weights, cardio?
It's different, you know, and that's one thing I think that was the biggest learning experience for me. And for me to be able to do what I'm doing today because I took my training serious, I took everything in the off season serious. For me to be able to look like I look now and to be able to do the things that I'm doing now is because I took time to make sure that I took care of myself. So for me, I just want to continue to keep doing it, you know, and if I keep looking and feeling the way I feel, then why not? I mean, it makes me happy. I wouldn't tell anybody anybody to stop. In fact, as I tell them, don't do, especially later on in life when you're not, have to bring home the bacon and you got to make ends meet and all those things, but you get to do what you want to do. Do what makes you happy, not what other people say you have to do.
What were your thoughts on Brock Lesnar when he got into the UFC?
My thoughts when Brock started MMA was I knew he could do it. I knew he could do it because he had a wrestling background. He was a big guy. He was strong. He could probably overpower a lot of dudes. But I also knew how long he was going to be able to do it when competition started to get tougher. When people started to figure out, hey, this is how you have to beat this guy. Once you did that, would he be able to adapt to your years and years of getting in there and fighting and staying on top? Because to be on top for as long as I was and some of the other guys are, you have to adapt a lot. You have to figure out, guys are figuring you out, and you have to change all the time. And that takes a certain kind of individual to be able to do that, mentally be able to change so that you can continue to keep surprising dudes and be able to change things up to stay on top. And Brock wasn't able to do that. And I think Brock mentally got beat. But I always thought that they didn't treat Brock right either. I thought they threw him in too soon. He's fighting guys that had 20 fights in his second fight because he's so massive and so impressive. It wasn't fair to him. If he would have got groomed properly, he could have been the best fight in any weight class, best pound for pound ever, if he would have been groomed properly. But he was thrown in there, a lot of mental breakdowns, not enough proper training.
Diverticulitis.
Yeah, that too, but I'm not sure that that's everything, right? I'm not sure I know that's a big part of it, but, what if he was trained properly? Would that even been a factor? Would that even, I don't know. I don't even know. I'm just saying, this guy had an opportunity to be great, and I just saw him mentally get dwindled down because he was thrown right into that with the guys that had a lot more fights than him, a lot more technical than him, and he was able to fight his way to get, even, 500 or whatever. I'm not sure what his final record was, but I know he was pretty close to 500, and in a short time.
Heavyweight champion of the world?
In a short time, you know what I mean? So imagine what you could have done with this guy if you'd have just groomed him properly. He could have been great. I mean, literally for years, could have been great.
Let's talk about the chapter in professional wrestling. You did it in Japan. You also did it statewide with the biggest organization in the world. Talk about that chapter.
Yeah, I was actually forced kind of to do that. Bob Meyerowitz called me, and we had worked on a contract, and he wasn't able to pay me the contract. The first thing is I want to say that Bob Meyerowitz always treated me with the most respect. He personally called me, and he broke the news to me about their troubles. I stayed with him for a little while, but then it came to a point to where I couldn't support my family. And to me, the first thing I need to do is I can do what I love to do, just as long as I support my family, because I took on that responsibility. The minute I couldn't do that, I always told myself, then I need to do something, whether I like it or not, to support my family. So I got to that point, and I remember Bob Meyerowitz called me because I had put a call in and told him, listen, I can't do this anymore. And I remember he called me, and Bob was real respectful, supportive. He understood, because they were going through their hard times, being taken to court all the time, spending lots of money trying to fight the band. And it seemed like every town they went to, they were going to court, and even moved a fight that we had one time because the state had actually banned it after they accepted it. So they were going through a lot of that stuff, and it was hurting. And so I had to make a decision to do something. And fortunately for me, I had a reputation as the world's most dangerous man at that time. And so I went to a bunch of the wrestling organizations, WCW, New Japan, WWF, WWE now, and I solicited my talent. And their first thought was, this guy's going to hurt my guys here. So they kind of wanted to know if I had any experience, and I did. I did it before I had started MMA. I did a little bit with Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson in Mooresville, North Carolina. And so when they heard that, lights started going off, like, wow, maybe we can, capitalize on this MMA phenomena. And so, especially with my name, Shamrock, World's Most Dangerous Man, I could do pro wrestling. It was like all these things are clicking. And Vince basically invited me down. He was the first one to jump on it. The other ones were interested, but they weren't, WCW was popping with all Hulk Hogan and all those guys, so they had a really big overhead. Well, Vince lost all those guys, and he had a lot of money he could spend. So I went down there and got a great deal, and so I started pro wrestling. And I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it because my dad watched it, and he was a big fan of it, and I was just kind of like, yeah, you know, I don't know. And I started doing it. And the first thing that clicked on me was like how hard it was. And then if something's hard for me, first thing that goes in is that competitiveness in me. It's like, I'm gonna do this. There's no way I'm gonna walk away from this and quit. Pro wrestling, oh way, I'm gonna do this. So then it became kind of a challenge. And then after I got into it and I started looking at the angles and the stuff man, these guys are talented. These guys they're really talented, and the stuff they do, bodies are just getting banged around, and it's not like a fighter where you stop people from doing something. I mean, these guys give it, and it's over and over, 7 times in one. I mean, you could do it 7 times in 1 week and take 2 days off, go back out and do it for 10 more days. So there's not a lot of time, right? I watched this and I was like, man, I got a very high respect for these guys. A lot of people I see talk about it when they mention I wrestled, and that stuff's fake, and it really makes me mad because they don't know how much work that takes. They don't know how much punishment these guys take. These guys are dying left and right because they've given their heart and their soul to this organization, and they'll do anything they can to stay on top, to stay in it, and not lose their spot. The guys are dying over this. Man, it is not an easy thing to do, and it is not something that you joke about and make fun of.
Definitely don't envy you. That must have been nuts to travel. How do you even get a workout in?
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to manage your time very carefully.
I was going to say, yeah. So let me ask you this. What's tougher? A guy going from MMA to professional wrestling or professional wrestling to MMA?
I think most people would be surprised on this answer, but I think that going from professional wrestling into MMA is a lot easier. I know, it's a shock because most people, oh, wrestling's fake.
Wow.
Right? But it's not. Just like we talked about earlier about how people talk about wrestling and how they say it's fake and it's not this. Man, it's a lot of hard work. There's a lot to it. You get a guy like Brock Lesnar or another guy who has boxing background or a wrestling background or karate background, goes from WWF or pro wrestling into MMA. They can adjust. They can fix their game to where they can compete. When you go from MMA, where you're already trained to hit, take people down, and hurt people, to go from that into something where you're not supposed to do that, your reaction and your instincts are hard to change. Your reaction and your instincts just happen because you've been training forever to do it. So when you get into a wrestling match where you're not supposed to like punch somebody hard, and all of a sudden you go to do, somebody hits you and you hit them back, all of a sudden that reaction, bam, you just broke this guy's jaw. And it's hard to change that, and you can't do that by practicing it. You got to do it by live wrestling, doing it. And so how many people are you going to hurt before you get it right? So it's very difficult and that's why you haven't seen anybody do it except myself. I'm the only one that's accomplished that, going from MMA into pro wrestling.